Now that we've started to explore project management in some depth, we're going to look at the role of targets and monitoring in managing a project itself. When you're working on a project and devising your proposal, you're also going to be setting targets for that project. And it's probably good to understand why agreed targets are important. The first thing that this does is that it allows all team members to really understand their responsibilities and also the timescale of the project. So if each person has a set of targets that also have dates attached, they can see how that really fits into the rest of the project as a whole. Also, the missed targets that could happen within the project each act as a little warning sign for project managers and team members. So if things aren't running to schedule or aren't running to the targets that you've set, that should set off that little emergency warning light, which means that you're going to need to make some changes to the way that things are working. The agreed targets are also things that help you be specific and measured and give a time limit to what you're doing. So they really relate to this acronym, this SMART acronym that we've been referring to a lot when we're talking about project management. And lastly, they help work out whether a team is achieving the aims of their project or not. So by checking back on your targets, checking back on both your aims and your targets, you can really see where you are with the project. And at times when you feel like there's just loads and loads of work and you're a bit bombarded with this, that can be really useful to see that you're already checking things off, that things are going to plan. When we're talking about targets, we are also going to be talking about monitoring. And it's good to ask that question, first of all, what does this mean? What does monitoring refer to? And really, it's just checking the progress and the quality of the work that's going on in a project environment. So this could happen through project team meetings, so people getting together and sharing how far along with their different tasks they are. It may also be through more formal progress reports from team members, and these would relate to specific dates or milestones, key points in the project's timeline. Also, you could be looking at collecting data along the way, so making different measurements. This might be things like counting, so quantitative data, but it might also be feedback like qualitative data, so about how well or to what level or what quality that things are happening at the moment. You're also going to want to look at comparing what you're doing, the delivery of your project, with the milestones that you've set for it, and benchmarking with similar projects. So somebody at another organisation, or possibly your organisation, has already run a project quite like this. So you could be using their standards as a benchmark with which to work out where your progress and the quality of what you're producing is. And if we're going to think more deeply about how we could check progress during a project, different monitoring processes that you might use or that you might come across will include things like referring to the project Gantt chart. That was the diagram that had a list of tasks, all linked up to different dates, that showed the progress of each of these tasks and the sequence in which they need to happen. You might be using project management software. So there's lots of different apps and different programs available to help you set up time limits and targets and give little reminders about when those are happening in your project. You might want to use critical path analysis. So this is working out which activities are critical to on-time completion and at what point you are at in completing each of those tasks. So how far along a bar of success you are or a bar of things being complete. You will want to be looking at budget monitoring as well. So the initial budget that was laid out in a proposal or in a plan will begin as your working budget, but then as you go through, things will shift and change. Some payments will be for different amounts. You might find out that there are things that you hadn't initially budgeted for. So all of that, you'll be keeping a track and a tally of those accounts as you go. And then you'll also be identifying bottlenecks and making changes to the project plan. So this idea of bottlenecks is when a series of tasks are getting stuck at one particular point and they can't move on. So this might be because too many of these tasks rely back onto one specific person. So then in the plan you would need to share that responsibility out between a number of team members, or there might be other points of agreement or things that you need to come to that are holding up progress in this way. When you're setting targets for a project, you also need to think about why are meeting these agreed targets important? Why is it important to stick to that plan? One of the things will be to achieve your outcomes early on. So there will be parts of your project that need to happen early on as stepping stones to others. So these deliverables and these outcomes, you want to be checking that you're achieving those early outcomes. Also, it will help you to confirm that your plan is likely to work. So after that proposal stage, when you've worked out whether your project is viable, you need to keep checking back as you're hitting those targets or as you're not meeting those targets to confirm whether or not you can actually maintain this project and complete it. This might lead you on to the point where you need to complete certain parts of your project to gain access to new resources for the next stage of what's going on. So this could happen for many different reasons. It might be because you need to build on different elements of your project, or it may be that funding comes in at different times related to different events that you're running. Lastly, you'll want to be looking at why we're meeting agreed targets, because really this highlights the shortcomings and identifies actions that are needed if the targets aren't met. So it helps you see really early on in your project whether there are things that you need to change dramatically. So if you can see that you've got a whole list of targets and you're really struggling to meet any of them, that's going to need quite a radical rethink in terms of your project's timescale and also its scope and the size of the project itself.